you're here.
Hello. I closed my mouth on purpose so that I wouldn't run my trap and ruin the music. Welcome to Fan Flak for another week. Um, Today, our guest rescheduled, so we are going to be discussing Star Trek in all its glory and all its incarnations. Um, Mark is an expert on Star Trek. He could actually probably arrange a PhD in it. And therefore, he will be leading the cause today.
Well, I have to tell you that I have seen every episode of Star Trek and every movie multiple times, except for Lower Decks, which I don't like, and Prodigy, which I don't like. So those two animated shows, I gave them a try, but they're just not for me. So I don't consider those Star Trek. It's like the animated series. I've seen every episode of the animated series, but some of them were better than others. Some of them were good. I mean, Dorothy Fontana wrote a number of the episodes, and some key canon things came about in the animated series.
Yep.
A lot of Spock, and I own one of the original cells from the animated series.
Whoa.
I picked it up at a garage sale for $1.
Now, is Trek fairly faithful to canon in that respect? If things are
It's
established?
it's probably closer than most series, but they have, for instance, probably the biggest thing that they keep changing is how many moons Vulcan has.
I noticed that.
There was an episode of the original series where Uhura is talking to Spock about, what it would be like to sit and look at the Vulcan moon, and then Spock tells her Vulcan has no moon. But then there are episodes of, especially the Abrams movie, where Vulcan has more than one moon. So it just depends on who's making the movie. I mean, folks, just realize there is no Enterprise. There is no planet Vulcan. These are all
Well,
television things.
there was a planet Vulcan.
Well,
It
not
sort of
really.
broke up.
Not really.
Well, it was
in the
supposed.
series.
No, they actually. Never mind.
Okay. Well,
We're not going to get into
I'm
that.
not aware of a planet Vulcan. If there
Okay.
was one, it didn't cross my.
Your reality.
Yeah, it did cross me. Uh, but so I mean, it isn't bad. It's probably, like I say, for a series that's run as many years as Star Trek has, for them to stay as close to canon as they did, well, it's mostly because of how much Gene Roddenberry enforced it, and the fact that Rick Berman, who came after Roddenberry, also enforced it. So
Yep.
because you had those two people in charge of Trek, they stayed pretty good. Like I say, there's if you want to pick it apart, there's a series of books called The Nitpicker's Guide to Star Trek. I don't know if you've ever seen
Yes, I
them
have.
or not. Uh, and it's really good because they went through the show and spotted problems like Space Seed, the original series episode that had Ricardo Montalban, where he
Right.
played Khan for the first time.
Right.
Kirk drops his phaser
Ah.
and never picks it up. And they beam off the ship and he leaves his phaser behind.
Oh, well, there
So,
you go.
and something that you'll, if you watch enough, and I didn't know it until I saw it in the Nitpicker's Guide, and then I've watched and you can see it. A lot of times they, in order to make a planet look different, they would use the same set, but then reverse the film
Yeah.
so that it looked different. Well, the problem is those emblems on their shirts are sewed on. So if you watch the show, they're walking around and the emblem's here, then it's here, then it's here, then it's here. And, Scotty's hair is parted over here. And then you see another picture of him and it's over here.
So you know when they flip the film.
Yeah, you can tell because the part in their hair moves and the thing on their shirt moves. So, little things like that, But, they didn't have a huge budget for the original series, especially in season 3. They cut their budget down to nothing.
Yeah.
Now, something a lot of people don't realize is who was ultimately responsible for Star Trek ever getting on the air.
I know.
Lucille Ball.
Yep.
Because Star Trek originally was on Desilu.
Yep.
And at that time, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz had gotten a divorce, so Lucy was the final word.
Yep.
And they were looking for a show that they could run for at least 3 years and then put into syndication so they could, because Lucy understood syndication better than probably anybody else because the I Love Lucy was in syndication. And that was what supported the studio was that. So they were looking for more of that.
Right.
So they produced 2 shows at that time, one of them being Star Trek and the other one being Mission Impossible.
Right.
And now Mission Impossible is where Spock went after Star Trek went off.
Yep.
He replaced, I forget the guy, the guy that played the bodybuilder on Mission Impossible. Yeah, Peter Lupus. Yeah. He replaced Peter Lupus, who decided to leave the show for, it was one of them. He thought he could leave and become a big movie star, and you never heard of him again.
Yeah.
A lot of people
there's
do
a lot
that.
of that happens.
That's a really, if you've got a television series and you're getting a check every week, don't do that. It's really a bad idea because almost every time you end up, like for instance, Wesley Crusher,
Will Wheaton.
Will Wheaton. He had been a fairly well-known actor up until he got on Star Trek. But after he left Star Trek, I really don't know of anything he did after he left Star Trek.
Yeah, he's written a couple of books, I think. I think he's mainly
and he hosts the podcast for Star Trek that comes on after the show.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a lot of people have gone to podcasts.
God knows, why would you ever do podcasts?
I have no idea. I mean, really.
Big stars like us are out here.
I'm here to tell you.
Now, Melody is a reasonably well-known author. She wrote a very popular book on Dark Shadows called The Dark Shadows Companion.
Yeah.
Now, I've never written anything other than shopping lists.
Yeah, but you're an engineer. You're very well respected at your company.
And my wife and I used to do a lot of the conventions. And that's where I got to know Walter Koenig and Jonathan Winters, and number of people. Bronson Pinchot's brother. He's not a big star. He's about a foot shorter than Bronson Pinchot.
Oh, well.
But he looks just like him, but he's a foot shorter. And so, hang on. I have a picture to show you. Hang on. So now here's me with Chase Masterson.
Oh,
she played Lena Alexander on Deep Space Nine, the Dabo girl that married Rom.
This is just before her hideous death at the hands of my sister-in-law. I'm joking.
What happened is she had a website and it was all messed up. And she had a laptop there at the convention, and she was showing it to me, and her pictures were all out of scale. Well, back then, the version of the software that created websites, it's called HTML.
Yeah.
You had to scale your photographs.
Yep.
Because otherwise it just blew them up to however big the actual photo was.
You had to lock in the image.
So her website was all messed up because the pictures were all. So I got in there and I edited the code and I fixed her website. So she gave me 2 autographed pictures and let me take that picture with her hugging me. So that was my reward for fixing her website.
Fixing your website. Now see.
So there's proof that I at least knew her.
There you go. I don't have pictures of me with any of the DS people. I knew all of them, except the ones who died before I got into it. But we have stories, so that works. And I do have a picture of me with Catherine and one with Jonathan Fred. But Jonathan.
I think that's the only Trek person I have a picture with. Is
Chase?
That one?
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Now,
whatever became of her? Is she still acting, or?
She's acting. She's doing a lot of, she's 20 years older than she was in that picture.
She's a working actress, I understand.
Yes, but she's still reasonably good looking, and she's doing some adult-oriented photographs.
Okay. Okay.
Nothing real nasty, but wearing less clothing than she was in that picture.
I understand. Well,
I think that was the peak of her career, was about the time period when she was there.
Yeah,
but she's a very nice lady.
Oh, I'm sure she is. She looks like it. Most actors are, except for all of the horrible stories you hear. Most actors are decent folk. I was going to say Catherine Scott, who of course was in Next Generation, an episode.
She played a Vulcan offshoot species.
Yeah, and she still has the ears from that, last I heard. So she I know she had a great deal of fun with it, and they often call upon her for things like that because people who work in science fiction remember Dark Shadows, so they've got her in the back of their minds for different things. So, and the same could be said for Laura Parker and the other actors who are still with us, David Selby.
Well, that picture I sent you of Jonathan Fred,
Yes.
from Arsenic and Old
You know,
Lace.
yeah.
That was posted on Larry Storch's
Yeah.
group.
Well, he was
Because,
in. Yeah, he was in the production.
yeah. And there's somebody still running Larry Storch's profile and posting as Larry Storch, which
Probably his friend Marie Wallace, who was
could
also on
be.
Shadows. They were very good friends, and I know she would frequently post pictures of him and that sort of thing. He
He
lived
was,
to a good old age.
oh yeah, 99.
Yep.
They had all plans out and everything for his 100th birthday, but unfortunately he didn't quite make it. But
Yeah, I think I would do what George Burns did, which was book himself. He couldn't die; he was booked.
yeah, he was the last of the F Troop cast alive.
He was among the youngest too, so
No, Melanie Patterson was younger, and she died
well,
before he. She died a long time before he did. I think she had breast cancer or
he
something.
did.
Killed her.
It's horrible, but the rest of the cast, yeah, you're right. There might be one or two stragglers there, but Dark Shadows is very unusual in that half the cast is still alive.
Yeah, it's funny. You see some shows like, for instance, Babylon 5.
Yeah.
There's just a handful of people left from that show alive, and a lot of them really weren't that old.
Yeah.
Well, they had two of them. Two of them OD'd. Jeff Conaway and one that played Garibaldi. I always forget his name. I can't remember his name. And Michael O'Hare that played Jeffrey Sinclair. He had a mental breakdown.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing with. I mean, if you look at a show like Glee, half the cast is dead, but it tracks down to drug problems and mental health issues and that sort of thing.
All right, well, let's get back on track. We kind of
yeah. Well, that's what I was just gonna say. Meanwhile,
back to Star Trek. Like we were talking about, the original series was allowed to be on the air by Lucille Ball.
right.
Of course, it was created by Gene Roddenberry.
Right.
Gene flew B-17 bombers during World War II. He was an airline pilot from 1945 to 49, and he was an LAPD police officer from 1949 to 1953. And then he started writing scripts. He wrote scripts for Dragnet, Highway Patrol, Dr. Kildare, Have Gun Will Travel, and then he got his own series called The Lieutenant. And some of the stars of The Lieutenant included Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, some people that he ended up using on Star Trek.
Repertory company. That's very common.
Now, the original series started September the 8th of 1966. It ran until September the 2nd in 1969, 79 episodes. Then it had the animated series. And the animated series, just a little thing, originally they were not going to use Nichelle Nichols or George Takei. And when Leonard Nimoy found out about that, he refused to do the show unless they brought them in too. Good. But he didn't insist that they bring in Walter Koenig. So Walter Koenig was not on the show, although they did throw him a bone and he got to write one of the episodes.
Oh, good. Well,
So at
I'm
least
surprised.
I know. I don't know. I don't understand that. Maybe he had problems with with Walter. I don't know. I
I'd
liked
never heard
Walter.
of anything about the problems between them, but not everything gets shared.
Well, I knew Walter. He collected toys, and we met at the Glendale Toy Show, which, by the way, was yesterday.
Yeah.
And we met there, and then we met again. He recognized me, and we met again at one of the Star Trek conventions. And very nice fella. But after his son committed suicide,
Yeah.
Walter changed, and I haven't talked to him since that. I've never seen him at a toy show or anything since that, so it's sad. Like I say here, let's see.
That happens so often too.
Then the first movie, of course, the Star Trek the Motion Picture.
I'm going to be having lunch with the Nervous Vulcan tomorrow.
Oh, cool. You let her tell her to bring the ears. You want to look at them.
Okay.
Get a picture of them.
Okay.
That was released in 1979.
Right.
Let's see here. Next Generation ran from 87 to 94, which was, I think, probably my favorite until right now. The Strange New Worlds, I think, is probably my favorite Star Trek. I really like that show. It's the special effects, of course, are amazing on these shows. There's some of them, Discovery, it was real hit and miss. They'd have a good episode and an episode that was like, what? Picard. I like the first season of Picard, but they've taken Worf and turned him into a pacifist. I'm sorry. You're ruining the show when you do stuff like that. So I don't know if I'll watch the next series.
Did he get into some kind of horrible problem that exploded?
I don't. It just annoyed me so much. I don't even remember what it was.
Okay.
There was the series Short Treks, and some of those were pretty good. They had the one where the Discovery, this guy got onto Discovery, and it was like thousands of years later, and the whole crew was dead, and he was talking to the computer that had become self-aware. I don't know if you've watched the show, but the computer now on Discovery is self-aware. It's
I've watched
it's an AI. Like I said, Lower Decks, Prodigy, I don't consider them Star Trek. They're just cartoons.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm very pleased with Strange New Worlds with Anson Mount and Ethan Peck. Jess Bush, I think she's kind of the weakest character playing Nurse Chapel. I'm not so sure. Christina Chong, I still don't understand her being Lan Noonien Singh. That doesn't sound like canon to me. And Celia Rose Gooding, I was looking up stuff about the cast, and I happened to see that her father was killed in the World Trade Center bombing by the Saudi terrorists back in 2001. So that was terrible.
Yeah, we need to make that very clear. It was Saudi terrorists that carried that out.
Well, that's the ones that they tell you not to talk about it. That's who did it.
Yeah. Exactly.
When I saw her name Gooding, the first thing that came to mind, her being an actress, I thought maybe she was related to Cuba Gooding Jr., but
right.
Nope, it was Calvin Gooding, who was some kind of a trader in an investment firm in the World Trade Center. Let's see here. Rebecca Romaine playing number one. I like her. I think she's excellent in that role. Now, I don't know if she's going to be on the show anymore. I'm not going to go into detail, but something happened in the last episode of Strange New Worlds that gives me pause that she may not be on the show anymore. I'm not going to give you any more details because I don't want to spoil it for you, but the last episode was an excellent episode. Oh, and Celia Rose Gooding won a Grammy in 2021.
Good for her.
So it's kind of similar because Nichelle Nichols was a singer. She sang in that feather dance in the one where she was trying to distract the people. Remember that?
Star Trek 5, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that movie was pretty terrible.
Oh,
out of all the Star Trek movies, that one was pretty terrible. I'm sorry, but it was.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, yeah. Now, one thing to bring up, there's a lot of fan films produced from Star Trek. A lot of them okay, a lot of them really good. My favorites out of all of the Star Trek fan shows, if you haven't seen them, these two, I highly recommend you look them up on YouTube, and you can see them on YouTube, is New Voyages with James Cawley as Kirk. I understand Cawley was a video game entrepreneur, and he used his money to build all these sets, and he got a college that taught computer animation and special effects, and they did the effects for the show, and they did an excellent job. I consider the best episode of New Voyages to be one called World Enough and Time. The acting is excellent. It has George Takei in it. There's an actress, I didn't catch her, I didn't get her name, I wish I had, that played his daughter. And she's an excellent actress, did a great job in that. And it also had Grace Lee Whitney in a small part in it. Now, also, Star Trek Continues, which ran for 4 years from 2013 to 2017. And that one has Chris Doohan, who is James Doohan's son, playing Scotty. And he resembles him, and he does the Scottish accent real well. And it's also the special effects on those two series are they're better than the original show. I mean, the time, you would think so, but they were very well done. There's the best episode of Continues, in my opinion, was one called Lolani. It was about Orion pirates, and the lead Orion pirate was played by Lou Ferrigno, who played the Hulk, which is kind of funny seeing him all painted green as an Orion pirate. So that's pretty good. Okay, let's see, branch off just for a second. I saw a live performance of a Star Trek episode at the Improv, and it was Spock's Brain, where they didn't alter the text from the show at all. It was word for word right out of the script, but it was funny. Because they'd give each other funny looks, and it was real well done. And one of the actors ended up in one of the I forget whether it was New Voyages or Star Trek Continues, but he ended up in one of them playing Chekhov because he looked like him. It's the one where Walter Koenig appears in it. and I think it's New Voyages. I think he appears in that. So whichever one it is that Walter Koenig's in, this guy plays the young Walter Koenig. And when you see him, say, "Oh yeah, it looks like he could be his son."
Huh?
So let's see here. Famous Star Trek guest stars. Okay, Ted Knight, who, if you recall, the Mary Tyler Moore show, he played
Ted Baxter.
Ted Baxter, and he had his own TV series where I think he was a cartoonist.
Yeah.
And he had kids that were, and anyway, he played Carter Winston on the animated series.
Voice.
Yeah, voice. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was on an episode of Voyager where he got to wrestle Jerry Ryan. I wonder how much he paid Star Trek to be in that. If you're a punk rock fan, Iggy Pop was in an episode of Deep Space Nine playing Yelgrim, who's a Vorta. He was one of the people that controlled the Jem'Hadar, which was the Dominion army. Stephen Hawking was in an episode of Next Generation playing himself in a holodeck scene where he, Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein, and Data were all playing poker, I believe.
Yeah.
Kelsey Grammer was in an episode of Next Generation called Cause and Effect, where they were in this time loop. They kept doing the same thing. It's one of the best episodes. They keep doing it over and over. Jason Alexander was in an episode of Voyager where he had a consortium of geniuses that solved problems for people in exchange for you traded them something. Let's see. Kirsten Dunst was in an episode of Next Generation when she was a kid. She played Counselor Troy's dead sister in a flashback episode.
And let us put a good word in for Counselor Troy, who is played by Marina Sirtis, who is a very kind and decent human being.
Yeah, she did something for me, which I'm not going to go into, but one of these, we ought to play that one time on the show.
Yeah.
Do you have it handy?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do. Maybe if we have enough time at the end of the show, maybe we'll play it.
Okay.
See, in 2020, my wife passed away, and I was pretty bummed out, as you can imagine, when something like that happens. And my lovely sister here was nice enough to get on this outfit called Cameo, and got Marina Sirtis to send me an uplifting message, and it was really nice. I really liked it and appreciated it, and she went well over and beyond, I'm sure, what she was being paid for. She did more than she needed to do, and I really appreciated that.
I should mention, I know the people who built Cameo, so I had a sort of in, and I explained to them the situation, and I wanted a Star Trek person for that reason. I had no idea that 1 year before the time when she was recording that episode, she had lost her own husband. I had no idea. And
yeah, so it gave us a connection.
Yeah, and it helped her because she was sharing from that point, and it was just really well done. I'm going to send it over to you because you know how to do the playing stuff from there.
Okay, how are you going to send it to me? On what? As a messenger or?
Probably Messenger. Is that?
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay.
And depending on how all this works out, you may see it this week or next week. We'll see how it works out. But anyway, while Melody's doing that, let me continue on. King Abdullah II of Jordan was a big Star Trek fan, and he asked him to be on an episode of Voyager. And they put him on there. He was uncredited. I don't remember the actress's name, but the actress that was in Total Recall that had the 3 breasts. You remember this? You remember that scene in Total Recall when she's in a bar? Well,
yeah.
that actress was on an episode of Next Generation, the one where she spills coffee on Picard.
Oh,
And so that actress, I'll have to come up with her name. I forget her name. Vanessa Williams was on an episode of Deep Space Nine. James Worthy, the basketball player, who was 6'8", he was on an episode of Next Generation with Michael Dorn, and he was, about a foot taller than Michael Dorn. Christian Slater, of course, almost everybody knows he was an Undiscovered Country, just a little bit part. I don't even think he was credited. Now, as far as guest starring roles on Star Trek, the king of being a guest star on Star Trek is Jeffrey Combs. Now, Jeffrey Combs played Herbert West in the Reanimator movie. He was in the last episode of Deep Space Nine, playing an anonymous holosuite guest in the background, just so he could say he was on it. He played Pink in a Voyager episode, the one that had the Rock in it. He played Tyron in Deep Space Nine, the episode Meridian. He played Kevin Mulcahy in Deep Space Nine. It's the one Far Beyond the Stars where Avery Brooks is playing a science fiction writer, and he gets harassed by these 2 racist cops, and he played one of the 2 cops. He was Krim in Enterprise, the episode Acquisition. In 15 episodes of Deep Space Nine, he played Brunt, FCA. The first episode being Family Business. That was the very first episode you saw Brunt. Then also on Deep Space Nine, he played Weyoun, who was one of the Vorta, and he was the most widely used Vorta, was Weyoun. And there was one episode where he played both Brunt and Weyoun in the same episode, which is the only time any actors played 2 widely disparate roles in the same episode. You had some where Brent Spiner played Data and Lore, but they were basically the same character. Now, also, he played Shran in Enterprise, who was the Andorian, the one who was buddies with Archer. And he was in the very last episode. Not too many of the cast were in the last episode. Just sidetrack a little bit. What the probably least liked things about Enterprise was what they did with the last episode. That they more or less made the last episode of Enterprise an episode of Next Generation, because they had Riker and Counselor Troy, Marina Sirtis, they had Riker on the holodeck, living out the last bit of time that Archer was on the Enterprise. And they killed off Connor Trenier. Well, they didn't kill Connor Trenier, but they killed Trip. Which, that made no sense to me. Why kill the guy? They couldn't pay him for one more episode. You can tell by watching the thing that they cheapened it up by not having to pay all those actors for that last episode.
That was probably the whole intent.
Yeah, because, they had to pay Jonathan Frakes and Marina Sirtis, but I guess they must have been cheaper or something. I don't know what the deal was there, but
women always work cheaper. But
Marina Sirtis did quite a bit of stuff after Star Trek.
Oh,
she probably did the most out of anybody except for Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, well, she was adorable also. So,
almost everybody on Star Trek was on an episode of Orville.
Yes, I know. But I had to email you the file we were discussing, the video. It would not. Yeah,
I got a messenger thing, but well, you talk about Star Trek for a minute.
Okay. Well, the sad thing about all this is I never watched Star Trek in the beginning because I was too young. I was like 6 or 7. I was stuck on Dark Shadows. Mark was watching Star Trek, and I think we both watched Johnny Quest and stuff like that. But I got into it a bit later when all my friends were. So I saw the first series. It was always my favorite. The second, the Next Generation, I remember seeing. It was during a period when I was working quite a lot, and going to school. I did watch Voyager. I liked Voyager the first season, and then it went insane. So we have Neelix's lungs to thank for that. And
well, they had a lot of trouble with Voyager because Jennifer Lean had mental problems, and she had to leave the show. And then they had some dispute between Jerry Ryan and Kate Mulgrew, because Kate Mulgrew didn't like them bringing her in. Well, but it did boost the ratings of the show, so it kept it on. So
yeah. Well, I liked the character of 7 of 9. I thought it was interesting. I can see how Kate Mulgrew would have been annoyed by it. But then again, you just have to take the whole show as the vision and go from there. But I got into Enterprise fairly well, mainly because the one group of people in the United States you do not see very often in science fiction is Southerners, and they actually had a Southern character as a central one, and he was actually heroic and he wasn't stupid. And then Brandon Braga decided to get into the mess and decided if he had that thick of an accent, he was a hick. Gosh, that'll be news to all of the people in Atlanta working in high-tech industry. Seeing as how they all have. And of course, he wasn't supposed to be from the real cell. He was from Florida. And I have news
And
for you.
well, they originally told him he was from Georgia, and then they changed it to Florida. And he went to him and he says, "People in Florida don't talk like this." And Braga said, "Nobody will know." So
Here's the thing. People will know. And
sure.
it will count against your series. And trust me, people in the north of Florida are very southern. But the rest of Florida, the Florida most people know about, that's not the case. And they should have kept it Georgia, because Georgians are, we're not talking about, West Virginia or Kentucky in terms of the rural areas. There's plenty of brilliant people in Kentucky and West Virginia too, but I'm talking about the rural parts of it. And but it was nice to see a Southern character who was intelligent and responsible. And then they, did what they did. But I stopped watching it when they brought in the silly affair between him and what's her name?
Jolene Blaylock.
Yes, and who has gone on to better things. Um,
What has she
the
done? I haven't seen her in anything since Enterprise.
Yeah, she's got a franchise I was reading about. It's not something I watch, so she's on one of those new streaming shows.
Well, when they originally brought her on the show, I guess she couldn't act.
Yeah, well,
And, well, they didn't hire her because of her tremendous acting skills.
no, they
Uh,
rarely
she,
do where women are concerned.
well, she was a very attractive lady. Uh, Her acting, though, got much better as time went on.
Yeah.
They had her taking acting classes and so forth, and she improved quite a bit. I saw uh, they had that. It's a documentary called Center Seat.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and they talk about, they had the actor that played Malcolm Reed. I'm trying to see, Dominic Keating. And he
I
was on there, and he was talking about the fact that she couldn't act, and he says, it wasn't her fault that she was what she was, but then once they gave her the opportunity, she caught
improved.
on very, very rapidly and became a good actress. I thought several episodes she was excellent on the show. Uh, I liked the show until they went into the Zenti thing. That just,
Yeah, that's about the time I clocked out too.
well, I
The
watched it, but I didn't think it was as good as it was
in the
earlier.
yeah,
You know, almost all the Star Trek shows, the first season at least is weak. Next Generation.
yeah.
You know, in the original episode of Star Trek, season of Star Trek, where Spock is yelling at everybody. You know, warp speed, Captain. Come
Yeah.
on.
Well, they didn't know what they were doing.
No, they didn't know where they wanted to go. There was no Star Trek to build on. It was all
There was no
starting out.
target to reach. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. But
They didn't know where they were going.
well, they once they got to a position where they could see the territory, they knew what to do, and they knew how to fasten the characters where they should be. And That's the problem you see with a lot of TV shows. They never reach that point. And um, there have been a couple of science fiction shows that and horror shows that never reach that part because it's a difficult thing to do. You got to get the whole vision in your head.
But Star Trek wasn't the uh, didn't have the most episodes of a franchise. I think didn't Stargate pass them at
Oh,
one time?
yeah, I believe so.
I now I think with Discovery and Picard and Prodigy, all these
Yeah,
5 or 6 series running all at once, I think they've passed Stargate back up again because Stargate hasn't made anything new in a while.
yeah. Well, that's the thing is that everybody. It's like when they talk about somebody so and so passed up the Beatles. Well, of course they did. The Beatles recorded for like 7 years.
Yeah. Now, just to, we've only got about 9 minutes to go here.
Yeah.
I want to let everybody know, unless Melanie gets a guest, which will supersede this, I'd like to talk about a British BBC television series that I have just recently started watching, and it is really good. And it's called Red Dwarf. Now, Melanie's not real familiar with it. I've watched the first. I watched the first 5 episodes. The very first episode, everybody on the cast except one person dies. So that's pretty unusual for a TV series to kill your cast the first episode.
Sure, it took like 7 all the way to the end.
Yeah, and there's one guy, he gets put in suspended animation. It's supposed to be for like a few months, and he ends up being in suspended animation for 3 million years. And everybody else, of course, on the ship dies. His cat evolved into a human-like person and is one of the crew members. And there's a hologram that's one of the crew members. Now that's the first episode. Then other people come along and join the cast as time rolls on. But it's very funny. Now, one thing that it has that you don't have in most sci-fi is this.
Silence?
A laugh track. Did you hear
that? No. Oh, there we go. I heard it then.
Yep, now there's not too many sci-fi shows.
No.
With a laugh track.
That, it makes you wonder what, because the laugh track kills a lot of comedy shows, especially the bad ones.
Oh, audio messes up. There's a show I like. It's called Deep Sea Detectives.
Uh-huh.
And where they go out and they went out and they found the Edmund Fitzgerald wreck.
Oh, yeah.
And they went out, but they add this burbling water noise to all of their diving sequences.
Why?
I don't know. It just annoys the hell out of me. And I got to where I stopped watching it just because of that.
What network is it on?
I watch it on Amazon Prime, but I'm not sure who's producing it. But, I mean, don't add burbling water. I know they're underwater. I don't need you to add burbling water.
I'm reminded of the blooper reel from Men in Black where Will Smith had this habit of doing sound effect sounds when he did something, like he'd hit a button or something. You'd go boop, and the director practically slaps him and says, "Stop making sound effect sounds." So I that one feels in that whenever you hear them augmenting the soundtrack with anything, you know, it- ghost shows with creepy sounds, and it's like, don't do that.
By the way, I
Yeah.
just got an email from Earthlink telling me my mailbox is full. So
Oh,
I will have to fix that before I can get a hold of the video that Melody just sent to me.
understood.
So we'll play it on another episode.
Okay. All right. And Marina, bless your heart, if by some rook or by crook you watch this one day on YouTube, thank you.
Yes,
And
very
I've
much.
already thanked you personally, but thank you again. Anyway, it looks like we're coming up on the hour.
Yep, 4 minutes.
I wanted to put a couple of things in here. I get a lot of remarks about my hair. Nobody ever talks about Mark's hair. And I should explain, I guess, that I had a gastric bypass. That's how I lost 225 pounds. And my hair, about 2/3 of it fell out. And when it grew back in, it grew back in weird. So I'm still trying to deal with it. And I'm sorry if it's not stylish, but I do the best that I can with what I have, as always.
What difference does it make?
This is the thing. And most of the time I have to say that it's troll remarks. It's people.
If you tune in to Fan Flak because we're so attractive,
Then
thank
you're
you.
Serious difference. You need new eyes.
But we thank you, those that have joined us today to watch the show.
Yeah.
We were up to 5 at one point.
We have 7 over on Twitch.
Oh, okay.
So we're building an audience slowly but surely. Bless your hearts. And I won't call you Shirley.
We kind of put this together in a hurry. I happen to know a lot about Star Trek, so that's why we were leaning towards Star Trek. Like I say, next week, depending on whether we have a guest or not, I'd like to go into at least part of the show, go into Red Dwarf and maybe show you a couple of clips of it. If you get a chance, you can buy season 1 for $10.99 on Amazon Prime, or you can subscribe to BritBox.
Yeah.
And on BritBox, you can watch Doctor Who, Red Dwarf, a lot of these shows.
Yeah.
The only ones you can't watch are UFO, all the Jerry Anderson stuff's on ITC.
Yeah, ITC.
Yeah, is on ITC, which is a competitive channel to the BBC. So
yeah, so it's not going to be on there.
No, you don't get that on there.
The other thing I was going to say is that I'm going to do a short interview with the Nervous Vulcan, that being my friend Joanne Nolan, who was actually won a contest to play an extra part in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. And you see her down in front, and she looks terrified.
And she's wringing her hands.
Yes. And the reason she is because she was terrified. She actually accompanied another friend of ours who wanted to win the contest. She wasn't even there to try out for the role. And they came over and grabbed her and said, "You're a Vulcan." And she said, "No, I'm not." And it went from there. So anyway, You guys have a great week. Let's all keep a good thought for Julian Sands, the actor, and hope that he comes out down from the mountain. And to all the folks who went through hell in our most recent shooting, let's keep a good thought for them. Until then, you guys have as good a week as you can, and that's a command. So take care. Bye-bye.
See you next week.